So recently I went over how to cut up different assets that you're creating for an animation with some collaborators. And so you can kind of see here that I've kind of broken up these characters that I did for an animated music video, which you can see at corykerr.com. And I'm going to take you through what I showed them, basically, which is how to decide where to cut things and why. So, like on her arm, if I were to say in text, the finger, the hand, the forearm, the upper arm, and the torso all need to be separate layers. Would you guys understand how to do that, or would it be helpful for me to go in and like explain that further?
My concern a little bit is like where are we cutting on like the shoulder, or where on the hand, like on the wrist.
Try to plan out where the joints are. So those of you that understand After Effects, try to plan out as you're illustrating where the anchor point is going to be. So for example, the anchor point that I had was like right here. And so I just made sure that that part of the layer always lined up and that this part would be able to swing around it. And so like I added like a little crease in the skin right here. And we probably don't need to do this too much, but just so you guys understand what I did, I added this little crease in the skin that I'll zoom in and show you right here, so that when the arm came in like this, there was this little tapering crease that, so it made sense that the skin would fold right there. So the anchor point being right here, and then everything rotating around that anchor point, I added in this little tapering fold of the skin so that when I pivoted right up here, it would make sense down here and not be weird, right? Also, the other thing that's really important is that this skin tone and this skin tone are the same, and that there's a shadow down here so that it matches the shadow right here. Does that make sense? It's only really necessary if something is moving quite a bit. And these hands are rotating. These hands are rotating, a pretty decent amount. I mean, you go from up here, all the way down, and then but like this, um, they're not rotating as much. And I made sure to make sure that like at the joint, so I have pinching lines in my inks on either side, and at the joint the skin tone is the same and there's no highlight or mid-tone value. It's all just shadow right there. So that'll just go right over the top of that arm. So I just came in with this arm, and the arm looks about like that. And then the hand comes in. Let me change colors here. So then the hand comes in, and the hand layer is like this. And so this one would pivot right about here. That's where your anchor point would be. And it would just rotate. And so this line and this line, and then this line and this line, they would never like break where there'd be like a seam, or it looks like the hand came off the arm or anything, because they kind of like think of every joint as like a Venn diagram. There's like a part of it that overlaps over the other part. So like that's what that ended up looking like, right? And so this is the forearm, and you can see I kind of planned out the elbow, um, being the pivot point. So my pivot point was like right here at the elbow. But then when I overlap that like this, okay, I can turn that, and it just kind of overlaps. But I can't go too far. He wasn't designed to straighten his arm. Like the whole time he was just going to be just doing this. So I would have designed it completely differently if I needed him to like fully extend his arm, because it breaks right there, right? But I only needed from like here to there. And so I just designed it just to do that one move. So that's why it's kind of important to understand like where it's going. And then the hand over here, right? Same thing. Okay. I didn't design it to like move too much. You see how I'm pointing with my finger. You see how it just kind of ends here, right? And then I overlap it like that, and then I can rotate, and it still fits because of a couple things. One, I don't have my lines. If you have lines, you don't have to have strokes, but I don't have my strokes closing that off, and the skin tone matches. So you notice that I even went in right here and I had the highlights or the midtone values kind of stop short so that it's just that darker midtone value and the darker midtone value. And so when I overlay those, it's really hard to tell where the one starts and the other stops. Um, this too, right? You see, this is his neck. And you would think that you would put the collar part of his t-shirt on his torso, right? But if you don't put it on his torso, then I can move his neck around quite a bit or rotate his neck quite a bit, and it still looks like it's attached to his torso. If I didn't, it would get really complicated. I would have to line up the neck with the collar and make sure that the one didn't break out of the other. So what I ended up doing is I just put that with no fill color on the bottom of the neck, and then I can place it anywhere on this shirt and rotate it, any way that I want, and it still feels like it's part of that shirt. And then the other thing is if let's just put this here like this, and then I'll go grab his arm. Notice this, this whole part of the torso here is all in shadow, and that's because, and it's black, so it matches my line work. That's because I can put this on like this. Notice my highlights match up with my highlights. Okay. And then I don't really need to worry about all the stuff that's happening down here. So even if I do come in and kind of break a little bit, that shadow hides that break somewhat. Like if these two are on white, that starts to look really weird, right? But if I plan it out and I put it over, I could even come in and rotate this even further. And to a certain extent, you're not going to notice that break too much because of the shadow that's underneath it. It kind of hides it. The really important thing is anything that moves needs to be on its own layer. And then you just think of like how does that need to be on its own layer? So like this one, for example, bones are super easy, right? Because their skeletons don't stay together on their own anyway. There's all tendons and muscles and whatever, but like we like to pretend like a skeleton walking around would work. It wouldn't work. So you really just have them overlap, right? That's why the first couple of things that I animated were all insects, because insects have ball and socket joints, and they're super easy to animate because you just put one over the top of the other one and then you just rotate it. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with this. If you look, the hands, right? There's a layer. Let me screenshot this and I'll show you. I'll just draw the layers of this. So one layer goes like this. Let me change brushes to something like this solid. So one layer just comes up and it does this, and then it continues, even though there's no ink, it continues with that fill color like that. And then the other hand is the same. And so it comes in like this. And then the leg, right? Same thing. I run out of colors here. like that. Ear, right? It comes around like that. This ear comes around like that. And then the head, okay, you can see where the head is. It just comes in. And so, and then the body, the whole thing just comes up like that. So it just overlaps like that. And then you can put anchor points for each one of these things on where they rotate, as long as they have this overlapping area between the head and the body or whatever, right? So as long as those areas overlap, they can pivot and rotate and stuff like that. Simple things like this arm is a good example. You just put that right over the top like that. You notice how it's got the tapering things, and it matches. Okay, the same gray on the same gray, and then this has this big chunky shadow. You just put that right underneath, and then you can add whatever hand you want to it. Or hands. Like that. Okay, and then all these can move around and whatever. I feel like I'm now just repeating myself, but I can show you more stuff, or you can say our brains are full. Let's stop talking now.
This is brilliant. This is so cool.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, there's just a lot of that, and then the other thing to think about would be something like this sail. So this sail doesn't rotate; it bends. See how the sail kind of bulges a little bit? It doesn't rotate; it bulges. What that is that's puppet pin at the corners, and then one in the middle that kind of folds it in half. And so wherever I wanted it to stay, it stayed there. And then when it fills up with air, it's actually bending that layer. And so things that don't have like a solid skeletal structure, you're just looking at them bending. So if you're looking at that, now everything's. I hate how Apple deals with full screen. It's so wrong. So I just needed it to be on its own layer, and then I could go in and bend it. And you can test that in Photoshop with the puppet warp. And so you can come in and I don't think I was on the right layer. You go to Edit, Puppet Warp, and then you can grab these like that. And I just grabbed this one in the middle, and you can kind of just test it to make sure it works. Like, yeah, that kind of fills up and it kind of moves around with the air or whatever, Works a little bit different than in After Effects, but it's the same concept. So those are the two basic types of animation that we're going to be doing.
This is illo time.